I want to start first by just expressing my mahalo, my appreciation to all of you for taking the time to share this space with me this afternoon to talk about a subject that is near and dear to my heart. And I think it's been a topic that we've been hearing a lot about in different ways lately, recently especially. And so I think it's timely for us to talk about this topic of Ho'oponopono. So I'd like to acknowledge, first of all, or tell you a little bit about myself and acknowledge those who have been my kumu, my teachers over the years. So my name is Luana Kawa'a. I am a Maui native, born and raised here on the island of Maui. I grew up in Kihei. I now live in Pokukalo with my ohana on a second generation Hawaiian homestead. We are a multi-generational ohana, living in a multi-generational setting like many of us because of our housing situation here on Maui, but definitely love having my ohana close to me. I have 4 biological children and 2 hanai children. They are all adults now. I have 1 mo'opuna that is a grandchild who is 8 years old, and another mo'opuna coming in December. So I am proud tutu of these 2 mo'opuna. Looking forward to the new baby that is arriving soon. They really are my greatest work, and to me, they're my biggest accomplishments. I'm married to my high school sweetheart, Llewellyn. We have shared more than half of our lives together. So definitely he is my best friend and my support, my backbone. I have a bachelor's degree in Hawaiian studies from the University of Hawaii at Hilo. I started at what was Maui Community College and then transferred over to Hilo to get my bachelor's in Hawaiian studies. And then I received a master's in education through the University of Phoenix, specializing in secondary education. And I'm currently in the process of moving towards a PhD. But in the interim, I am pursuing a second master's in peace studies. And so my plate is definitely full, busy. I work at UH Maui College full-time as the director of Paikamana, which is our TRIO student support services. We work with first-generation low-income students and students with disabilities, helping them to gain access to college and to be successful in college. I'm also a Kumu Hula. I've been teaching hula on Maui since 1995, and I have been dancing hula since the age of 6, so long time. My Kumu Hula are Antonina Maxwell, Pukalani Holt, Keali'i Reichel, Uluwehi Guerrero, and for a while I was in Hilo, I danced with Halo Okekuhi. And so I just want to honor them. When it comes specifically to Ho'oponopono, my training in Ho'oponopono comes from the late Auntie Mālia Craver, who was a master in many, many things. She was a prolific composer, spoke Hawaiian fluently. Mana leo, Hawaiian was her first language. She worked with what was then Queen Lili'uokalani Children's Center for many years. And I was privileged to be part of her last cohort in which she taught Ho'oponopono. And so I flew to Oahu weekly to meet with the rest of the cohort. This is during my tenure at Kamehameha schools, and was very, very fortunate to go through the training to become a Haku Ho'oponopono, or facilitator of Ho'oponopono. So that's a little bit about me. And of course, I always want to bring honor to those who have taught me. Today, we're going to talk about Ho'oponopono from the perspective of it being a Native Hawaiian framework for conflict resolution. So we're going to kind of break that down and talk about what that means, how I was trained in Ho'oponopono, and how I use Ho'oponopono in my daily life. So we'll start first by sharing an olelo no'el. I love Hawaiian proverbs. They have so much ike kupuna, so much ancestral knowledge and wisdom. They are great reminders to us. And although they were said hundreds of years ago, they are applicable to our lives today. And so I'd like to start with this one that says, "A'ohe pau ka ike I ka Hālau ho'okahi." Knowledge does not end in one school. And this is a great reminder that there are various philosophies, there is variation in mana'o and in teaching. And depending on what kumu you go to, for what particular area of our culture, there may be slight differences and some variation. And that is maika'i. That's something that we should embrace and not be critical of, because our kupuna were dynamic and innovative. They were not stagnant. And they had their own philosophies, their own mana'o, their own ideas and thoughts, and their own traditions, depending on what island you lived in, whether you were more isolated from the rest of the community. These traditions were passed on from one generation to the next. And so when you see these slight variations, I think we should be cautious not to be critical, but to embrace the different mana'o in our culture. So keep that in mind as we go through this presentation, especially if you have learned about Ho'oponopono previously. The second thing that I ask is that we all act in a pono manner during the presentation, but also after. So please ask permission before using the information that's shared in this presentation. Don't change or add things without permission. Seek guidance from a trained Haku Ho'oponopono if this is something that you want to incorporate, whether it's in your family, in your life, in your work that you do. And be respectful of this ike kupuna, this ancestral knowledge and wisdom. And the reason I start off with this is because I'm sure, like me, you have seen on social media how Ho'oponopono has been misused, especially in these contemporary times. And that's something that I want to be very cautious of and thoughtful of as I share these things with you today. I have not really shared too much publicly on the training that I've received, and that's because I'm always hesitant that it will be misused. And so today, what I share with you, I just hope that you will use it in a manner that is pono. All right, so what is the definition of Ho'oponopono? So Mary Kavena Pukui, who wrote the series Nana Ike Kumu, she defined Ho'oponopono as this, what you see on the screen: to make right, to restore and maintain good relationships among family, the specific family conference in which relationships were set right through prayer, discussion, confession, repentance, and mutual restitution and forgiveness. So this is Tutu Pukui's definition of Ho'oponopono. We'll notice that there's two aspects. There's the definition of the word Ho'oponopono, which is to make right or to restore pono. Whenever we add ho'o to a word, it becomes, ho'o is added. For example, ho'o added to pono means that we want to create or restore a state of pono. And so that's the idea of Ho'oponopono. But the second part is that Ho'oponopono is also the action of coming together to conference, to kuka, to have the discussion that leads to Ho'oponopono, leads to things being restored to a state of pono. So think about that as we move through this presentation today. So the first thing that the next thing that I want to talk about is mauliola. So mauliola is the Hawaiian word that we use for well-being. Mauliola is not just our physical health, but it includes our mental, emotional, spiritual well-being as well. And so mauliola is important to us, whether you are Hawaiian or not. Well-being is very important. When we are taking care of our mauliola, then we can better care for others and do the work that we do, especially those of you here in this presentation. I know that many of you carry a huge kuleana in the work that you do, social services, taking care of our people, helping our children. That's a tremendous kuleana that you awamo, that you carry. And so taking care of our own mauliola, our own well-being, is extremely important. So one of the things that I like to introduce for us, especially those of us who are in these roles of caring for others, is my version of the lōkahi wheel. So years ago, Kamehameha Schools came out with a lōkahi wheel, and it was introduced and it's been used a lot in different contexts. And this is kind of based on that, and based what I learned from the lōkahi wheel and from Auntie Mālia. But really what it is about is, how do we create and maintain lōkahi within ourselves? Balance, harmony, and unity. So in the work that I do, what we do with as a staff and what we do with our participants and our students is we have them use this wheel to check in, with themselves. And we use 5 different areas. First, the kino, which is the physical body, the ohana, the family unit, whatever that family unit looks like. Every family unit can look different, a little bit different. And that's great. So the family unit who you consider your ohana, the na'au, so your feelings, your emotions, the mana'o, your mind, and uhane, the spirit. And so we talk about these 5 areas, and when we meet with when I meet with my staff, and also when we meet with our students, we have them check in and we talk about these 5 areas. When these 5 areas are in balance and are in harmony, that is when we're at our best and our highest state of mauliola, of well-being. This gives us an opportunity to kind of assess and self-reflect on areas that we may need to address. How is my physical well-being? What am I doing to malama, or to take care of my kino, my physical body, this vessel that I have been given, right? What am I eating? What is my movement? What am I doing to ensure that I physically can take care of the kuleana that I have? Ohana, what's happening in my ohana? What are those elements and components of my family unit that affect me? And how can I keep that in lōkahi? How is my spirit? What is my uhane feeling? What is my spiritual connection? And how do I fill my spiritual cup on a daily basis, so that when I am out there using my mana, extending that mana, right, to others and caring for others, I have that reservoir of spiritual strength that I need to do that. How is my mana'o? What are my thoughts? Do I have a growth mindset or a fixed mindset? Am I thinking positive thoughts? Am I doing things to create those positive thoughts? Am I using affirmations? Whatever it may be, to help the mind be strong and healthy. And then the last area is na'o. What is my emotional state right now? How am I working through my emotions and my feelings? How am I releasing when I need to? And how am I coping with the emotions and feelings that I'm experiencing? So this is a great tool, and you're welcome to use this however it works for you. And I'm happy to share the graphic with you as well. So this is a great way for us individually to check in if you're in a supervisory role, to check in with your staff, and then your clients, whoever it is, that population that you work with, to be able to check in on our mauliola. Okay, so here's some of the things that we can ask when we work through the wheel. What am I doing daily to establish lōkahi and mauliola? Have I checked in with myself? Maybe I need to bring that lōkahi wheel out and do a check, Yeah. And sometimes we need to be held accountable. Sometimes you want to do that check with someone else, right? An accountability partner that can do that with you. What do I need to do to ho'oponopono to restore that balance and that well-being in that particular section of the lōkahi wheel? So these are great questions to start with. The point here is that ho'oponopono begins with us, right? We cannot help others ho'oponopono if we don't actively engage in this process ourselves, checking in with ourselves and making sure that when we need to restore that pono and that balance, we're doing that. Yeah. And again, it's what works for you so that that pono is reestablished. Now, when we are doing that and we are at our best as far as mauliola and our well-being, then we can begin to use ho'oponopono as a tool to help others. So Tutu Pukui says ho'oponopono is getting the family together to find out what is wrong. Okay, so now we're looking beyond self and we're helping the unit, whether it's the ohana, the family unit, whether it's your work unit, whether it's the clients you're working with, people in your community, right? That's the family that we're talking about. Maybe to find out why someone is sick or the cause of a family quarrel. Then with discussion and repentance and restitution and forgiveness, and always with prayer to set right what was wrong. Okay, so let's kind of look at what that involves. So in order to do Hawaiian ho'oponopono, there's some things that everyone has to agree on. So again, when I use the word family, you can relate that however you want to in your work environment, with your clients, with your physical family, right? With yourself. That family, the word family can be extended to all of that. First of all, everyone involved has to agree to the process of ho'oponopono. If someone doesn't agree, then the ho'oponopono cannot happen, right? Everyone has to be on board and willing to use this process. Second, be willing to tell the truth. So oia i'o, truth is so important here because in order to ho'oponopono, restore pono, we have to be honest. Yeah, we have to be sometimes brutally honest, right? And sometimes honesty can be difficult to hear, right? And that sometimes can be a challenge. And also, I will say that in our culture, we have been taught not to say things or how we feel if it's going to hurt the other person. Yeah. And sometimes we have to step back from that and realize that we have to say the truth. Yeah. And then we work through the emotions that come of that. The third thing is that ho'oponopono always comes from a place of love and a desire to restore aloha, right? Between whoever it is, whether it's two people, whether it's a group of people, it comes from a place of aloha, it comes from a place of love, and that great desire to be pono again, to have pono among each other. The fourth is confidentiality. And I'm sure all of you are very familiar with confidentiality in the line of work that you do. Whatever is said in the ho'oponopono stays there. It does not leave the circle. And then the last thing is the haku, which is the word we use for the facilitator of the ho'oponopono process, must be someone that everyone agrees on and feels will be fair in the process. And this is where sometimes we need to bring in a third party. Yeah, there may be someone in your ohana that's trained in haku ponopono. Yeah, however, it may be a situation where to resolve that conflict, a third party is needed to be involved. So what is the process like? And again, the process can vary depending on who you go to, right? Who the haku is. This again is what I learned from Auntie Mālia. Pule. So pule, I've never heard of Hawaiian ho'oponopono without pule. Yeah. Now, this does not mean that it is associated with any type of religion. What it is it's invoking a higher power to be present in this process. And when pule is done, what then the result of that pule is that there is what we call the ho'ike. Yeah. So the Haku Ho'oponopono through the pule is able to then receive ho'ike, or a showing or a revealing of the problem. Yeah. Even before the kukulu kumuhana, the statement of the problem, often through the pule, the haku will already have an idea of what the situation is and what some of the underlying issues may be. So in the third step, the parties involved will do the kukulu kumuhana, will state the problem. Sometimes the Haku Ho'oponopono will do that, especially for me as a Haku Ho'oponopono. I like to meet with the person who is asking for the Ho'oponopono and get a little bit of background first. So sometimes the Haku will state the problem, yeah? And then we go from there into the mahiki. And the mahiki can be a very long process, or sometimes not a very long process. This is the peeling away of the layers, and we address each layer. And this is where the art comes in of being a Haku Ho'oponopono and being able to listen and carefully peel away those layers so that we can get down to the root of the problem. 9 times out of 10, the Ho'oponopono will start, and what is being said at the beginning of the Ho'oponopono has nothing to do with what the real problem is. It's all of the stuff that built up, yeah, over time because of one initial pilikia, yeah, one initial problem. Usually it's hurt feelings. Someone is offended by something, yeah, that was said or done. So by the time the haku comes in, sometimes there's many layers already built up. And so the kuleana of the haku is to help to peel those layers away and help those present to focus in on what the true problem is, where it started, yeah, the root of all of this. In that process, the haku also is making sure that he or she is checking in on the emotions and monitoring the emotions that start to come out in the process. It is the haku's job to make sure that when emotions start to rise, that the haku helps to diffuse that, right? Address it, diffuse it, bring the emotion down so that we can refocus on the process. Now, sometimes we have to do what is called a ho'omalu. Yeah? Sometimes the emotions are too much and too overwhelming, and we need to ho'omalu, we need to do a timeout. Sometimes that can be done by just doing silence and allowing everyone to regain their composure and to work through their emotions. Sometimes the ho'omalu means we're gonna stop this ho'oponopono and we're gonna come back at a later date. Yeah, because right now we're not ready to work through, to get to the root of the problem because the emotions are too high. And then often the haku has to work one-on-one with the individuals to get to a point where we can then bring the group back together. Yeah. It involves oia'i'o, complete honesty. The haku helps each person to express their truth, to say their truth, in a manner that will cause the least amount of negative reaction, right? So again, the haku has this kuleana of really being in tune with all of the participants in the ho'oponopono. There is honest confession, right? And then once we get to the root of the problem and we've worked through that, now we need to look at how do we make things whole. And sometimes that there is a process of restitution, and meaning that apologies, the mihi, yeah, the seeking forgiveness, the mutual forgiveness, the perhaps it is having to go and physically do something to make amends for the wrong that was done, the heva that was done. Yeah. So that is decided by the group with the haku helping them in that process. Mihi, that's the goal. The goal is that we can break down those layers, get to the root of the problem, right? And then start the process of forgiveness. That's what we want. We want to be able to mihi, to forgive, and to restore the relationship. And then again, it's important to close with pule. So in our culture, we always open with pule and we always close with pule. That's the vehe, that's the open, and that's the ho'oku'u or the pani. That's the closing as well. And that you see that in Ho'oponopono, you see that in la'au lapa'au when it comes to Hawaiian medicine, when it comes to healing, all of these aspects, hula, all of these things have a vehe with pule, and then a pani, a closing with pule as well. So pule plays an important role in the process. Okay, so let me go back real quick. Okay, the next thing that I want to talk about is I want to kind of specifically talk about the haku or the facilitator. So as I said earlier, the family or the group needs to agree on who the facilitator is going to be. And this is important because there needs to be a level of trust with the facilitator, right? Trust that the facilitator is going to be fair to everyone involved and that the facilitator is going to honor confidentiality, yeah, honor the feelings of everyone in the circle who's participating in the ho'oponopono. Traditionally, this would be an older kupuna that would come in into the role of a Haku Ho'oponopono. Today, it's hard to find kupuna that are trained or that want to, that want to step into the role of a Haku Ho'oponopono, because as a Haku, you also have to know how to release all of that afterwards, right? And we'll talk about that in a moment as well. Respected by those who are involved in the Ho'oponopono, trained as a Haku, have training now, and that could be formal training like what I went through and what others in our community are going through, or trained within the ohana. Yeah, perhaps it was they were trained by their kupuna. That is equally as valid as a formal cohort of training, right? They were trained by their family, by their kupuna, and this was passed on to them. That is all the training that is needed. The discussion is always channeled through the haku, right? So in the circle, the participants don't talk to each other, they talk to the haku, right? And if you've ever been in any kind of conflict resolution with a mediator, that is essential, right? That they talk to the mediator, because that helps to diffuse the emotion. When they talk to each other, the emotions can get high really, really quick. But when you're talking to a neutral third person, those emotions tend to stay a little bit more in check. Yeah. One person speaks at a time. Yeah. We don't interrupt each other, and you don't speak until the haku calls on you. Yeah, these are some of the rules. Now, even though rules can vary a little bit and can be decided upon by the haku, as a Haku Ho'oponopono, I like to usually meet with whoever the head is that's coming, seeking Ho'oponopono, and then establish, these are the commitments that I need from the group, and then what perhaps are some commitments that the group wants to establish as well. So that's something that the haku can work with the group on, establishing at the beginning, what are our commitments to each other? Yeah, we don't like to use the word rules so much, but we can use the word commitments. What do we commit to in this process? Okay. Now there are times where we need to oki, okay? And there's a couple of different times that we use the word oki. So oki means to sever, to cut. It also can mean to release, but release through like this action of cutting or severing. So oki has to happen in the Ho'oponopono process once we've come to we've figured out what the true pilikia is, what the root of the problem is. We've come to the point of mihi, where we can forgive, begin to forgive and restore relationships. And then it's important that the haku assist everybody with releasing. Sometimes this is also called the ho'oku'u. I like to use the word ho'oku'u for this. Now that we've worked through this process, how will you ho'oku'u? How will you release all of this so that we can holomua? Because if anyone is still hanging on to something and unable to release, we got to work through that. Yeah. Sometimes that might be on an individual basis with the haku, or it can be done in the group. But it's important to help those who are participating understand how to ho'oku'u. Now, there's different ways. One of the things is cleansing through hi'uwai, or sometimes called kapukai. And this is where we go to the ocean, and we go into the ocean and we immerse ourselves completely, and we stay in the water until we have released all of the emotions that need to be released, right? Whatever negative feelings we've been carrying, whatever eha, whatever hurt we've been carrying, we ho'oku'u, we release that. And the reason we go to the ocean is because the pa'akai, the salt in the water, is a cleansing agent. It has cleansing properties to cleanse us, cleanse our uhane. Yeah, talking about the spiritual cleansing that we go through. I like to hi'uwai every time I feel like I'm carrying stuff. I like to go down to the ocean, go in, release, and you can figure out what works for you when you're in the water. I like to pule, I like to talk and let things out, and I like to stay there until I feel like it's all gone. And when you come out of the ocean, you should feel cleansed. You should physically feel that all of that ino, yeah, is gone and has been released. And if you don't feel that, stay in the water. Stay there a little bit longer, yeah? Or perhaps there's still stuff that you need to work through as well, okay? So these are some of the things that we can teach those who are participating in the process to do. I've been in Ho'oponopono where the person, or one of the issues that comes up is with someone who has already passed, away. And one of the things Auntie Mālia taught us is to go to either the gravesite or where you feel most connected to that person, and to go through the process of mihi there. Yeah. Sometimes going to that physical place associated with that person helps us to feel close to them, yeah, pili to them, and to do the mihi and the ho'oku'u and the oki process there. So those are some of the things, some of the ways that we can release, even when perhaps the other person is no longer present, whether it is through passing, or the person isn't willing to ho'oponopono, right? What do we do when the person that we need to ho'oponopono with is not willing? Can we still ho'oponopono? Absolutely. Yeah, we must, for our own selves, go through some kind of process to restore that pono within us. Yeah, and so there are ways to do that that can be done with a haku ho'oponopono. In addition to teaching this process of release to the participants, it is important that the haku also go through this process, right? If I do a ho'oponopono, I will definitely hi'uwai afterwards to release whatever I've taken on, even inadvertently, in the process of ho'oponopono, because it's deep. You hear things, trauma that comes up, you know, all kinds of things come up in ho'oponopono. Sometimes things that have been held and quote unquote secrets that have never been shared are revealed in the ho'oponopono, and it's heavy. It's heavy for the participants, but heavy for the facilitator as well. So it's really important to malama ourselves when we are taking the lead in this process. Negative emotions manifest physically, right? For us to maintain a good physical well-being, we need to make sure that we're able to release and let go of these negative emotions. Now, the other part of oki is to sever a relationship. Now, that is never the outcome that we want. We want to be able to restore relationships. But unfortunately, there are times where we have to sever, right? And the haku will help guide that process and will determine, we're at a point where this relationship we're not able to restore this relationship. And an oki is done. When an oki is done, it means that that relationship no longer exists. Yeah. And you come to a point of that person or those people are no longer a part of your life. It's probably, well, it is the most difficult part of a ho'oponopono when it comes to the point where we cannot restore the relationship and there needs to be an oki. An oki is done when the relationship is unhealthy and is going to cause more trauma and more eha to the person. That is when we come to the point where we need to oki and we need to say, I no longer can have this relationship with this person, with these people, or sometimes it's with this organization, with this job, yeah, that we have to oki. So those are, that's kind of ho'oponopono in a nutshell, but I did want to leave some time for questions that you folks may have for me. You can just unmute if you have a question, and if you're too shy to unmute, you can put it in the chat box and I'd be happy to answer.
Can we get a like a copy of these? I mean, just because it's a good, like I love hearing the presentation, but I definitely need memory triggers.
Yeah, definitely. So what I can do one of two things. I can share like an outline, whether you want to see the presentation. Sometimes the presentation, you see the presentation, but it doesn't really trigger things. But I could do, I could also share an outline. If you want something like that, you can email me at my email, kumuluana@gmail.com. And I think it's good to email me because then we can have some conversation too about how you want to use it. And then I can figure out the best way to share with you. Mahalo.
Auntie, there's also a question in the chat box from Kim.
Okay. If a timeout is taken of days or weeks, are the individuals allowed to bring up what was said in the ho'oponopono without the haku present? No, they shouldn't. Yeah, good question. So if a ho'omalu is called, what that means is everything stops and it's not discussed until we're able to come back together again. And this is where the haku has to really become involved with the ohana or with the participants. And sometimes it requires talking individually with them. We want to bring them back as quickly as possible, but yeah, it could last a week, you know, or more before everybody is ready to come back. But the haku should maintain contact with the participants so that if they feel that need, like they want to talk or share, they could share individually with the haku and express their feelings, but they shouldn't be doing that with each other without the Haku Ho'oponopono present. Yeah, because that could just create more pilikia. How long does the whole process take? Woo! Okay, so I have been in Ho'oponopono that have gone 6 hours. Yeah. I have been in Ho'oponopono that have been 30 minutes. Yeah. So it really depends on, and I think this is the point that I want to emphasize today. if we are using ho'oponopono, okay, so sometimes people think of ho'oponopono as the long drawn out 6-hour process. We only do this when like there's a bunch of pilikia and we got to resolve it. No, if we ho'oponopono regularly on a daily basis with each other, with ourselves, then we don't have to come to the point where it takes 6 hours, right, to work through and figure out and go through all of those layers. So I think the most important message that I want to get across today is ho'oponopono is also the process of making right every day, right? Self-reflecting at the end of the day, or even when we get really good at it in the moment. Ooh, what I just said, I didn't mean it that way, and maybe it came across that way. And as soon as you feel that in your na'au, you're probably right. So how do we ho'oponopono right then and there? Go to the person and say, hey, I just realized what I said, and I feel funny about it, that I might have offended you. I want to apologize. Boom. That problem is settled right then and there. The person can respond. We don't have to wait until more and more layers build up, right? So that's the beauty of ho'oponopono, is that if we do this all the time, we make right every time, then it doesn't have to get to that point where there's this huge pilikia. Mahalo, Kayla. Thank you for your comment.
If I could ask a question.
Ikino, sure.
Thank you. Yeah, so we do mediation at our company as well, and it's and I can see where we might, and also we're opening our teen shelter hopefully within the next 6 to 8 months. We're going to be getting families in who are in conflict, and I know we're going to want to make referrals out, especially for families who would be open to doing this process. And so, what would be how would we? What's the best way to do a referral to someone, or how do we find practitioners beyond? Obviously, I'm going to email you as soon as we're done here, but try to set up a relationship with you. But are there other practitioners? How else might we find practitioners who could help us with that?
Yes, and so that's what we're trying to do right now, is kind of establish like, what would be like a list of those who are trained and are willing, right? And then also like, what are the specializations? Like maybe one haku might want to focus in on children or families, or maybe others want to focus in on organizational type of work. And so we are trying to put together a list, and there are different schools of ho'oponopono as well.
Right.
And so we are trying to put together something like that. But if you emailed me, I could definitely give you resources. I can be a resource, but I can also, if I'm not available, I can also very happily share other resources with you.
That's great. Thank you. And if we wanted to get training in this, I mean, I imagine this is a lineage. I'm very sensitive to like the ideas of cultural appropriation. Would it even be appropriate for me to get trained in something like this? Or what would that look like? I don't have any idea.
Yeah. So that's another thing that we've been talking about recently. Those of us who are trained, there is a training going on right now. Keola Chan is another practitioner, excellent practitioner, and he currently has a cohort that he's working with. The Palignawans, I think, are also part of this, of the Ho'oikaika conference. They also do trainings in Ho'oponopono. For me, we are currently looking at how we want to do that, how we want to share trainings. So that is in the works for us, but I would again be able to point you in the direction of those who are already ready to do training, and then I can also share with you what we have planned in the future.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Sure. Mahalo.
Anna has a question in the chat too.
Oh, okay. Mahalo, vai. Okay. Can people be added to the Ho'oponopono as things are being revealed? Also, if in the revealing there is molestation, is there criminal charges even in the confidentiality? Oh, good question. Okay, so first part of the question, yes. Sometimes in the process, we realize that there are other people that should be involved. And that may mean a follow-up Ho'oponopono. Sometimes it can be resolved without the person present. It just really depends on what the situation is. Anytime that there is any type of criminal activity that would be revealed in the Ho'oponopono, I think that's the first thing that I share with them, is that if what you share with me, if there is some kind of abuse going on, that is something I'm mandated by my own personal integrity to report that. Yeah, so I don't work for an agency where I'm mandated to report that, but that's something that I will disclose at the beginning, that because of my own values and beliefs, that would be something that I would want to bring in the right experts to assist with that. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. It's very delicate, very, very delicate.
Aloha kumu. I have a ni now.
Aloha. Is that Caitlin?
Hi.
Aloha.
Hi. So you talked about oki, and I have like a two-part question. Are there different types of oki in terms of like cutting someone off completely and forever versus like cutting off like certain kuleanas that you feel are like not respecting your own personal boundaries? For example, if like, I don't know, the ohana always like expects you like to plan like the parties or the get-togethers, but it's like weighing down on your own health and you're just like, I can't do this anymore. Do you guys, is there different like levels of oki? And
yes,
then
definitely.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, was there a second part to your question?
Is that something you feel comfortable sharing, or is that like a two-part
Sure.
Ho'oponopono?
Yeah, so what I will say is, so oki really is the severing, right? So it means that it could mean two things. So it could mean, and we need to go with what the person is comfortable with. Is that relationship severed forever, right? Or is it, I cannot have you in my life right now, and I will decide when I can try to restore this relationship, which might then involve a follow-up ho'oponopono when that person is ready for that, right? Or when both parties are ready for that. The second part of your question would be, I wouldn't call that part oki, I would say the commitment part. What are the commitments that we're gonna make to each other? And setting boundaries is super important because, sometimes we don't feel empowered to set boundaries for ourselves, or we feel like culturally we're not supposed to do stuff like that. So in the process of the ho'oponopono, when we're in the restoration part, it's important that we then set boundaries. This relationship is being restored. However, these are our commitments and these are the boundaries that I'm now establishing. Does that answer your question?
Ai, mahalo nui.
Okay. Ai, hiki no. Any other Nino, any other questions? Yeah, definitely, Anna. Integrity is the key, right? Okay, so if you got anything from this presentation, I'm hoping that it is the fact that Ho'oponopono begins with us, yeah, taking care of ourselves, restoring that pono within ourselves. And Ho'oponopono is something that we can do on a daily basis to make right with the people that we're surrounded with, the people that we work with, the people that we love, the people that we care for. And when we do that regularly, then we avoid the bigger pilikia, the bigger problems that takes a little more time to work through. Mahalo, ya'oko pakahia po, no ke komo ana mai. Thank you for being part of this. Let's see. What if some parts of the system don't want to do this? Yeah, that's a good question. And I can share more with you if you want to email me about that. But I'll just say in regards to that question, that was a big thing at Kamehameha schools because we got trained in this. We became Haku Ho'oponopono. But then when it was time to implement, there were a lot of issues within the system, right? Can we legally do this? lots of issues come up. So that has to be worked through with the system, with the organization, definitely. Yeah. But I believe that it's possible. If this is the form of conflict resolution that resonates with you and with your organization and with the people you serve, it is possible. So again, mahalo nui a oko pakahi. I want to honor everybody's time and the time for the next presenter as well. If you have follow-up questions or would like to talk stories some more, feel free to email me at kumuluana@gmail.com. Although I am not physically in your presence, I've definitely felt your mana today, and I'm grateful for your presence. So mahalo nui.